David versus Goliath comes back to the country. That's powerful. Hello viewers, I'm your host, Gabriel Buelna. I hope you're enjoying our 2021 episodes. They're exciting and I love them, so I hope you do too. So today we have attorney Antonio Gallo. Mr. Gallo has over 11 years of experience working in several areas of the law. One of those areas is residential landlord-tenant law. So we're going to go over three things today in the video, and we hope this is helpful along with you doing your own research. So the three things are, one, we're going to go over some of the basic issues that are occurring in landlord-tenant law with some specific COVID implications. We're also going to go over very quickly some of the tenant laws that landlords and tenants should understand both. Finally, if you're a tenant and you face eviction, what are your options? What are you supposed to do? So Mr. Gallo is going to go over some of that today. However, before we begin, so in terms of our show, BuelnaNews, click below. If you're not on our site, go to BuelnaNews on YouTube and subscribe and click that little thumbs up right there or down there. It makes a difference. But also, please remember that we're going to go over California tenant law mostly, even though we're going to go over some federal issues. However, each case or situation is unique. The following information does not constitute legal advice. For legal advice, please contact an attorney. Our discussion is generic and just meant to be useful, so you can go and then either communicate with an attorney or do your own research. So let's get to it. So Mr. Gallo, could you give us an overview of what's happening with evictions in California? Help us understand the issue and the effects on COVID, but also on people and families and what's going on.
Hello, Gabriel. Thank you for inviting me on your show. It's an honor. As of December 2020, we've had over 1.1 million renters in California who are behind on the rent. And of that 1.1 million, we have about a little bit over 800,000 who are low-income households. California renters are facing an estimated $3.7 billion in rent debt, and which is about approximately $3,400 per household. Obviously, when there is a crisis, folks of color are the ones that are affected the most. We have Latino, Black, and Asian households that are nearly 3 times as likely to be behind on the rent than their white counterparts. 32% of low-income households are behind on the rent compared to only 9% of non-low-income households. We are having a disaster here in California and Los Angeles. Folks are losing their places, their homes. Folks are losing their houses. Folks are losing their security. We had a family come into our office who was living in the Boyle Heights area for about 10 years. The rent was still adequate. They lost their job, and now the landlord has sent them a notice to pay rent or quit. And I'm sure this is a common story that we are facing all over Los Angeles and for sure the country. But because in Los Angeles, we also have the issue of high rent. Rent is normally higher than other places. We are facing a point where it's going to break and individuals are going to lose their homes and their apartments. And the homelessness in Los Angeles is going to get a lot higher than it is right now.
So thank you very much. So if you're a tenant or a landlord, there's some basic law that you should understand. You should understand your city, or you may live in a county or state or federal law. Can you go over some of those basic city, county, state, federal laws that people should research on their own and understand no matter what, especially during COVID?
Yes, Gabriel, because we live in a republic, we have different levels of government and different jurisdictions of government. We have local, which is usually city council or city laws. You have the county laws, you have state laws, and you have federal laws. Normally, your city should be the most protected when it comes to tenant rights. It just depends on the city that you live in. In Los Angeles, we are very protective of our tenants. We have the Los Angeles Residence Ordinance that protects tenants when it deals with evictions. We also have the cities of Santa Monica that are really protective of tenants. We have the city of Inglewood that just passed tenant rights for tenants. But it all depends on your city. If your local city doesn't have really an ordinance, then we can look at the county of Los Angeles. The county of Los Angeles.
Or any county, right? If you're Northern California, potentially the same thing, correct?
Correct, or any county. But LA County just passed an ordinance that protects tenants. It is for tenants who live in what's called the unincorporated areas of Los Angeles County. For example, like East LA, there are certain protections that tenants have when it comes to evictions. We also have the state of California. The state of California passed a Tenant Protection Act of 2019, which in essence said that if a landlord is going to evict you, they must find some fault to evict you. If there is no fault, then they may be precluded from evicting you. There are some exceptions to that. We also have some COVID relief that the state has passed that was just extended by Governor Newsom. We have what's called Senate Bill 91, which extends the eviction moratoriums through June 30th, 2021. If any tenant owes rent between September the 1st of 2020 to June 30th of 2021, then they must pay 25% of the rent by June 30th, 2021. If a tenant pays 25% of that, then the landlord is precluded from evicting that person. We also have AB 3088, and that law said that if you owe rent between March 1st of 2020 to August 31st of 2020, and the tenant or the landlord has now served you a 15-day notice to pay that rent, if you tell your landlord and you provide them a declaration of COVID-19 related financial distress, then they are precluded from evicting you. So it all depends on what month you owe the rent, will depend on which law is going to affect you. We also have some federal protections. The CDC guidelines just issued a policy having a moratorium on evictions for non-payment of rent until March 31st of 2021. There's some exceptions to this. You must be able to obtain or try to obtain some form of rental assistance. You don't expect to earn more than $99,000 a year or $198,000 for married couples. You're experiencing a substantial loss of household income. Doesn't mean that you've lost your job, but it just means that as a whole, your household has lost some form of income. And if you were to be evicted, then that would cause you to be homeless. And the whole purpose of this CDC guideline, because they don't want individuals looking for a place to live during this pandemic, right? We have mostly stay-at-home orders. We want everyone to be safe. So the CDC decided to issue this moratorium. But this moratorium is only until March 31st, 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Gallo. So, viewers, we've gone over, what the issue is, how folks are being affected with COVID and tenancy issues with regard to evictions. And attorney, Mr. Antonio Gallo, eviction, not specialist, but has focused on that for many years, just went over some city, county, state, and some federal issues. So Mr. Gallo, finally, what are some of the actions that tenants should take if faced with evictions? And this is what I mean. If you're a tenant right now and you can't pay your rent, you're trying to figure out, okay, you appreciate that folks are understanding the issue. You know that there are these laws, right? What are some of those steps individually, emotionally, that kind of tenants should take? And then once they assess their situation, what should they do?
Yeah, so normally what happens is that there are two steps in the eviction process, right? There is first the notice of something, either notice to terminate the tenancy or notice to pay some rent. Once that expiration of notice happens, then the landlord is able to go into court and file what's called an unlawful detainer, right? The owner wants to get possession of their property back. So if tenants are facing a situation where they aren't able to pay the rent, the first thing I always suggest is that they talk to the landlord and explain the situation and see if they can work something out, if that's possible. If the landlord isn't working to work something out, then fortunately, right, we have these new laws that were passed by the state of California that are able to help tenants out, right? If they just give a declaration that says that they have suffered some type of financial distress because of COVID-19, there should be some protection, right? So the first thing that a tenant is going to receive is going to be a 15-day notice. Originally, it was a 3-day notice to pay or quit for rent. Now it's a 15-day notice. Within those 15 days, if you receive that notice, you should be informing your tenant as to the reason as to why you're unable to pay the rent. If you do not do that, then the landlord may have some legal actions to file an unlawful detainer against your case.
Mr. Gallo, going with that, and after that, I want to know about some free services for tenants. But what's the best type of behavior with regard to landlord and tenant that you've seen works in order to try and avoid conflict, especially right now with COVID? What are some best practices?
Well, as we have all said, we're in this all together, right? It's going to take a village for us to kind of get out of this mess. So what I've noticed is that whenever landlords and tenants treat their situation as a relationship, right? They both need each other in order to survive. And if they can just communicate some of the issues that are going on with them and communicate in a very respectful manner, I think it goes a long way. I've represented tenants where they've said to me, had the landlord just come to me and spoken to me as a person, or I've heard landlords say the same thing, right? Had the tenant just come to me and explain the situation, we wouldn't be in the situation that we are right now.
So at the end of the day, we want to avoid, even though you're an attorney, and we want to avoid going to court, correct?
Correct.
The court wants to avoid going to court. Landlords want to avoid going to court. Tenants everyone wants to avoid going to court. So before we get to that process, try and communicate and have empathy with each other. Would you agree with Mr. Gallo?
That's right, Gabriel. Empathy goes a long way, especially during this time of crisis.
That being said, if that doesn't work, what are some free services that are available for tenants? Yeah,
well, there's always legal aid. I know legal aid is very well versed in tenant rights. You have the Eviction Defense Network that also serves the public. They are a nonprofit. They have one of the best tenant rights attorney, which is Elena Pop. And then you have other nonprofits that are around the city of Los Angeles. You can also go into the Los Angeles Superior Court website, and there's some self-help there that you can also look up.
But just in case they can't get to those options, can they communicate with you? How would they do that?
Of course, they can always call our office. When it comes to tenant rights, we offer free consultations. They can call our office at 1-800-719-2551, or they can send me an email at antonio@agallolaw.com.
And viewers, you'll notice that the phone number and the email of Mr. Gallo and the URL to the website are right here. Mr. Gallo, thank you. Is there anything else that you would like to let viewers know with regard to tenant issues that they may be having?
Yes, if they receive any type of documents from the landlord, do not ignore it. If you receive any documents from the city of LA regarding your tenancy or any governmental entity regarding your tenancy, do not ignore it. Read it. If you need someone to translate that, you should take it to someone, or always contact your local law office or legal aid.
Thank you, Mr. Gallo. We greatly appreciate your time. Viewers, this is Gabriel Buelna, your host. I want to remind you that we've gone through this interview with Mr. Gallo, and right now we just went through an election. We have a new president. We have vaccines, and may or may not going, but we're in this together, and we need to be able to treat each other right, communicate with each other. That being said, feel free again to subscribe. Press the little subscribe button down below. Visit our other videos. And be good to all your fellow citizens around, as let's make this world a better place.